Guess what? I've got my hands on the new 13-inch iPad Pro with the M4 chip. In this video, I'm gonna give you a practical review from a real iPad user. Do you really need to upgrade to this Mac Daddy iPad Pro? We're gonna get to the bottom of all of it. Plus, I think we got some hints about what's to come with Apple devices in the future with some of the new features in this drop. I definitely think there's some Easter eggs that you should keep your eyes out for in this video, and we'll circle back to that at the end. And I wanna know if you noticed what I noticed. All right, let's jump right in and talk about that new screen. The iPad Pro has this new OLED screen. In fact, Apple's calling it tandem OLED, and they're very excited about the nits and all these other technical specs. And I have to admit, the picture on this thing is beautiful. But the picture on the iPad has always been beautiful. Let's see how it stacks up to the screen on the last iPad Pro. The iPad on the left is the last version of the iPad Pro with the M2 chip, and the one on the right is the one that just dropped today. Apple says to expect a more vibrant picture with deeper colors and darker blacks. And I do agree that if you look closely, you can see a bit of a difference, particularly with this last image. But when I really noticed a difference is when we took it outside. Again, the iPad on the left is the M2 version and the one on the right is the M4. And holy cow, that screen is so much brighter in direct sunlight. And you cannot deny that the screen on the right is far more legible. But the other thing we notice is that if you hold the iPad horizontally, you can now see the screen while wearing polarized glasses. We tried to demonstrate that with this shot and it was definitely not successful, but just trust me, you can now see the iPad screen while wearing polarized sunglasses if you're holding it vertically or horizontally. To me, that's a really big upgrade. All right, now let's talk about the speed of the M4. The new iPad Pro has an M4 chip. They just totally skipped over M3. And what this really means for users like you and me is that the app developers will be able to do more with their apps because of this greater processing power. In the Apple event, they specifically called out 3D modeling, and it's true, 3D modeling is a heavy lift. They also talked about some upcoming video games that are gonna have greater realism and a better user experience. All thanks to this chip, the developers can really push those games further. And of course, the new Final Cut Pro iPad app will be optimized for M4. You're gonna be able to sync up to 4 cameras to your iPad Pro and create multicam clips in real time. That sounds really exciting. Now, I don't have access to that Final Cut Pro app yet, but rest assured, as soon as it comes out, I will have a full review for you on that. If you're watching this video in the future, check the description box because I'll link to it there. If it's not available yet while you're watching this, I'll link to my other channel where that video is gonna live so you can make sure to subscribe. But I was able to run some tests with the last version of the Final Cut Pro app on both the M2 and the M4. I opened up the demo project that comes with that Final Cut Pro app, and I timed out how long it took to render on each device. You can see I only gained a couple seconds there for render time, and again for exporting. But one thing I did notice was that when I hooked up an external drive to import clips into the app, on the M2 version, it took way longer to load the thumbnail previews than it did on the M4. So there's definitely some sort of speed difference there. If anyone out there has an M1 iPad with Final Cut Pro for iPad installed, I would love for you to run the exact same test with that demo project. Let us know in the comments what the render time and export times are for you, because I do feel like you're going to see a bigger difference between M1 and M4 than we saw here with M2 and M4. All right, now let's talk about the size of the iPad. This new iPad is the thinnest Apple device ever. And you can see on this side by side, it is in fact thinner. Now, this is a very buzzy talking point for Apple, but as a user, I don't think it really makes that big of a difference. If you hold them side by side in your hand, you can definitely feel that one is thinner than the other, but it's not like the last iPad was so thick to begin with. So I wouldn't say the size is a reason to run out and buy this new iPad. It's just not enough of a selling point, although it is pretty cool. But what does that mean for the battery life? There's been a lot of speculation about what the battery life would be. Some people think it would have a diminished battery life because the iPad was so thin. Other people speculated that because the M4 chip was so powerful that maybe if you were not using it to its full capacity, you would actually have extended battery life. All Apple would commit to was that you get all day battery power with your iPad, but I thought there was only one way to solve this mystery. I set up these two iPads side by side. Each of them is on full brightness with 100% battery power. And then I called up the movie that nobody asked for, the Fellowship of the Ring Extended Edition, and started playback at about the same time. And you'll see that this is actually my laundry room where I shut the doors quite tightly because no one wants to look at Frodo's feet for 4 hours. Am I right? Now, I will say this M2 iPad is about a year old, but it is very gently used. This is my work iPad. I use it exclusively at work and for work where I'm taking notes in meetings. Maybe I'll do some light editing on it, but there's definitely been times where like a whole week goes by that I don't even pick it up. So it's a very, very gently used iPad. So about 3 hours and 45 minutes later, you'll see that the M2 had 52% battery left, but the M4 had 75% battery life. Battery life is obviously really personal depending on how you're using your iPad. If it's working harder, obviously it's going to drain the battery more. But I would say that from this kind of scientific test that the battery life on the M4 is great. Now let's talk about a change I'm personally really excited about, which is that the selfie camera has been moved on the new version of the iPad. In all iPads past, that selfie camera was on the short end of the iPad. And now with the iPad Pro with the M4 chip, it is finally moved to the landscape edge. In my mind, the iPad should be the best device for conducting Zoom calls because it's so mobile. But with the placement of that camera on the short edge, I never used it for Zoom calls because the angle was so low and unflattering. And even when you're looking right at the screen, it looks like you're not. And I think it just looks rude. So I am so excited that they finally put that selfie camera on the landscape edge where it clearly has belonged the whole time anyway. All right, now let's dive into the new upgraded accessories that were announced last week, starting with the Apple Pencil. And by the way, I'll link everything you see in this video down below. With the new Apple Pencil Pro, you can hover your pencil over your screen so you can be more precise before you actually start writing on your image. They've also dropped this squeeze function, so if you squeeze the Apple Pencil, this curved menu pops up where you can select your writing implement. Very, very cool. It also has a new haptic motor, which means that as you make moves with your Apple Pencil, you actually get a little bit of a rumble feel. So for instance, when you're now hitting the undo button, you can actually circle back incrementally. And at every step, you get like that physical feedback in your hand. The new Apple Pencil also has barrel roll. That means that if you're using a writing implement that looks like a marker, you can spin the Apple Pencil and either use the wide edge or the narrow edge, just like a real marker. The Apple Pencil connects with a magnet to the top of your iPad for storage. And that's cool and all, but I will say that every time I connect my Apple Pencil to my iPad in this way and then drop the whole thing in my bag, the Apple Pencil is always gone. It's always at the bottom of my bag. So while I like this, I don't really think it's the best solution for long-term storage and portability of your Apple Pencil. And apparently Apple kind of felt the same way because they have added Find My to the Apple Pencil. So if it does jump off your iPad, you can find it. I guess that's great. The other only note I have about the Apple Pencil, and it's not just this version, it's every version, is I feel like it's just not that ergonomic. You know, Apple's a company that is known for their aesthetics, but maybe not for their ergonomic designs. And I think if you're like asking me to squeeze this Apple Pencil, like give me a divot or something for my knuckle. Like I just think that could be a little bit better. But overall, this new Apple Pencil is awesome. What about the other accessories? Apple is touting the newest version of the Magic Keyboard as all new. I don't know that I would call this all new. It does have a bigger trackpad and it does feel a little bit nicer. And we now have this new row of keys at the top where you can control your volume and brightness on your iPad, which is amazing. So while the Magic Keyboard has gotten an upgrade, I certainly wouldn't describe it as all new. If you've never seen the Magic Keyboard or used one, it's actually pretty cool. It basically turns your iPad into a little mini laptop and serves as a carrying case for your iPad. And it just snaps right here magnetically, and it uses the charge from your iPad to power the laptop, so you never have to charge it. It's actually a very cool device. And if you're using your iPad for work purposes, I think you're really gonna love the Magic Keyboard. Now let's take a look at the new Folio Case for the iPad Pro. You can now rest your iPad at 4 different angles with this new Folio. And this Folio, I would say, does feel quite nice. It's got the magnets in it, and it really highlights how slim this device is. but it is kind of pricey. I feel like in no time you're going to be able to get a knockoff on Amazon for this Folio. But if you're super into the Apple brand and you want the whole setup and you really like the aesthetic, maybe spring for the Folio. So with all that said, do you need this new M4 iPad Pro? First, let me say that I'm a huge fan of the iPad. It is my personal favorite Apple device. I know there's a whole generation of people who don't use an iPad, who don't see the need for it, and in fact, they think it's like the boomer device. And it is true that the boomers have kind of co-opted the iPad, but I think that's a shame and they're missing out because I'm not a boomer, I'm cool. And I think the iPad is an absolute must-have. I know I said with that M2 iPad that a week will go by and I don't pick it up, but that's my work iPad. My personal iPad is with me at all times. It takes so much abuse and is just so durable and portable and such a joy to use. But the question is, do you need this iPad? If your current iPad is at end of life and you're genuinely in the market for a new iPad and you can spring for this one, I think you'll be really, really happy with it. It's pretty spectacular. Also, if you work in the creative fields, if you use a lot of design apps, you're doing 3D modeling or a lot of heavy video editing, I think you're gonna be excited about the speed and the way developers are configuring and optimizing their apps to work on this M4 chip. So I think this is also a good fit for you. If you have a need to use the iPad outdoors, let's say you're a landscape architect and you want to be able to show your client renderings while you're standing in their backyard, this brighter screen is going to be a game changer for you, as is the fact that you can now hold it landscape and still see the screen with your polarized sunglasses. This also might be for you if, let's say, your job requires you to project an image of success. Maybe you're, founding a startup and you're looking for venture capital and you're taking a lot of meetings. This skinny little iPad is definitely a flex. It's a conversation starter. It's got the Riz. It's definitely going to give people an impression of you, I think, with this device. And frankly, that's what a lot of people are looking for with Apple products. But if you're just, using your iPad to shop on Amazon, maybe hide under the covers and watch, old HD episodes of Project Runway, you don't need this particular iPad. You could definitely get something a little bit more affordable. As far as the Apple Pencil, and I will say the Pencil is a pretty niche device, not everyone needs it, but if you are an Apple Pencil user, I would say don't wait for your last pencil to be end of life. This thing has enough of an upgrade that it's worth going out and picking up right now. As far as the Magic Keyboard is definitely an awesome thing to have if you can spring for it. If you feel like you're really going to be taking a lot of notes or typing a lot of emails on your iPad, I would spring for the Magic Keyboard. And the Folio, like I said, I think you're going to be able to get a knockoff of that a lot cheaper than what Apple is charging for it. So those are my thoughts on the new M4 iPad Pro. Now let's go back to the Easter eggs that I talked about at the beginning of this video. What really caught my eye was the fact that they moved that selfie camera from the portrait edge to the landscape edge of the iPad. This is significant to me because when the iPad first came out, it was thought of as like a big iPhone, right? And I think the intention originally was that you would hold it vertically, but we all know no one really holds their iPad that way. People typically hold it horizontally. So why did it take so long for that selfie camera to move to the landscape edge? And why did it take so long to be able to hold an iPad horizontally and see the screen while wearing polarized sunglasses? Now, this new version of the iPad Pro works both ways with this new OLED screen. However, for all the years past, they could have chosen to be able to make that screen visible with sunglasses on horizontally, and instead they chose vertically, portrait, this whole time. So why are we making this change? In my opinion, it seems to me that Apple is finally acknowledging that the iPad in this era is not really iPhone adjacent, it's actually more laptop adjacent. And to me, that's great news because I don't want my iPad to be more like my iPhone. I want my MacBook to be more like my iPad. I want to be able to touch the screen and write on it with an Apple Pencil and tear it right off the keyboard, but still run the Mac OS. I would love to see a fusion between the iPad Pro and a MacBook. Does anyone else have any interest in that kind of device. I feel like with this new iPad, maybe we're inching a little bit more in that direction, and I think that sounds fantastic. So those are my thoughts on the M4 iPad Pro. Do you think you're gonna be picking one up? I'd love to hear from you. Let me know down in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to my other channel if you want to get that Final Cut Pro iPad app update review as soon as it drops. Thanks for hanging out, you guys. I'll see you again.